Bloodthirsty is a body horror film about obsession. Obsession with the pursuit of creativity, of achieving personal goals in your artistic endeavours, no matter what the cost. And how that can eat you alive. How you can get into these toxic levels of productivity in pursuit of something that's supposed to bring you joy. And how that can leave your world feeling hollow. And having watched this movie for this project, as somebody who has wrote hundreds of thousands of words, literally multiple novels worth of content nearly every single year for 4 years now, worked until the early hours of the morning on edits and scripts, only to wake up a couple hours later to apply makeup and shoot for most of my weekends because that's the only time I might not be working one of my 3 jobs outside this platform, creating a cycle that has left me with no free time for friends, family and hobbies for a goal that I set myself that no one was asking me to achieve and that did not need to be reached, and then insisted on releasing the end results of my efforts in a proven to be algorithmically unfriendly 31-day streak. Can't say I relate, to be honest. Directed by Amelia Moses, Bloodthirsty is a Canadian film written by Wendy Hill-Tout and Lowell Boland, and it is a film that I am very excited to cover today. Because as I was writing the words I am now saying to you all, I realised I don't think I've ever done a single werewolf movie in the over 80 episodes of this show we've done so far. You know, I'm thinking it back, and it's absolutely criminal. Plenty zombies, plenty vampires, we've had witches and monsters and serial killers, but we've not had a ginger snaps, not had an American werewolf. I've not even had a little teen wolf. I've written a werewolf movie before I featured one here. That's just bad form. I'm disgusted at myself. But today I get to right that injustice. And with a movie that's a lot less well known than those previously mentioned ones, so hopefully I get to point a few new eyes in the direction of some really great rising talent in horror cinema. So Bloodthirsty follows singer-songwriter Grey, who broke into the music scene with her first album, and everybody's clamouring for the always difficult to nail sophomore second effort. Her anxiety around the pressures of creating this album is going through the roof. At night, she has constant nightmares and dreams of being a wolf, and is on a bunch of medications for various mental health issues. Issues that are exacerbated by the increasing pressure of having that first album not be a fluke. Desperate to get something out there, she decides to take up on the invite of a social hermit music producer named Vaughn Daniels, an isolated recluse and once previously famous singer himself who has a slew of success under his belt as a collaborative producer with multiple artists. One problem though, as Grey's girlfriend Charlie points out, that dude might have killed someone. There was a big trial where he was charged with the potential murder of another singer he worked with, his wife Greta. However, he was never convicted. But you know what? He was found not guilty in a court of law. So that means he's totally in the clear. No court would ever just let a wealthy dude off with murder. It's only the truly innocent that are freed from the watchful, objective and fair eye of the legal system. Like OJ. Reluctantly, with particular reluctance on Charlie's part, the two make the journey out to stay with Vaughn while he helps produce Grey's second album. And the dude seems friendly-ish at first. He has a very intense servant who works for him, but he himself seems alright, bit quiet, kind of inoffensive. He very quickly ramps up in intensity though, not like Insano style straight off the bat, but he asks more and more of Grey as time goes on, encouraging her to dig up some deeper and darker impulses. He pushes her to do re-record after re-record after re-record, growing frustrated with each session that it isn't perfect. He encourages her to break her long-standing vegan diet, gets a fair bit confrontational with her girlfriend, and there's also the small matter of, did he just fucking teleport? The creative process begins to take a toll on Grey's mental health, as she seemingly begins to hallucinate turning into a werewolf, and it only gets more intense from there with her starting to crave the taste of raw meat. Reminder, this is a body horror movie. We are on YouTube, so I will not be showing you, for example, the scene where Grey drinks the blood collected at the bottom of a plate of steak, but you should know that that is a thing that does happen and it is as gross as it sounds. With Grey's dark impulses rising, her obsession with her music growing more intense, and her toxic relationship with her producer pushing her harder and harder, this begins to drive wedges between Grey and Charlie, who keeps trying to look out for her mental health, but is met only with pushback. It's all a bit much for everyone. It's a very stressful and demanding situation. It's bringing out the worst in Grey. But the thing is, her music does get better. Like, really good. And that's kind of the central discussion point of what Bloodthirsty is all about. Like, yeah, she makes great music. She starts to get the things she wants. She starts to achieve what she set out to do. But at what cost? And how far is she willing to go down this obsessive rabbit hole before it's no longer worth it? Will she lose her girlfriend? Will she lose her mind? Will she lose her life? There is, after all, still that small matter of Vaughn having been on trial for maybe murdering his wife, and he's a wee bit obsessive himself, but his favourite subject right now seems to be Grey. This is a film about consumption, about an all-consuming aspect of your life, which is why it's so interesting that it's tied thematically to the myth of werewolves. Within creative industries, you often hear these kind of hunger and consumption metaphors thrown around. You'll have heard the phrase starving artist, you'll often hear someone described as hungry when they're working hard to break through to the next level of success. You'll hear success stories about how their work consumed them. Again, can't relate of course. And you see this manifesting both metaphorically and physically within Grey. As she grows in obsessive pursuit of her creative goals, as she becomes hungrier and hungrier for that second album's success, she becomes hungrier and hungrier in reality. As her darker impulses lead her musical output, her darker side manifests, her transformations becoming more severe and frequent, and even though everything in her life continues to get worse from the moment she arrives at Vaughn's, her mental health, her nightmares, her wolfy blackouts she isn't even sure she is really having, and her relationship with the woman she loves. She can't even consider the thought of leaving. When Charlie says they have to leave because Vaughn scares her, she replies with, "You want to know what scares me? My second album flopping." When a moment of darkness overcomes her and she suddenly shocks herself by attacking Vaughn, Vaughn asks her if she would like to leave or stay and make the album, and she doesn't hesitate to say, "I want to stay and make the album." Even as Vaughn acts super creepy in a manner that starts to feel quite predatory in both the figurative and literal sense, again pairing its themes around discussions of art and the music industry into the werewolf metaphor, as he makes inappropriate marks, sniffs the air around her and pushes alcohol onto her, she again doesn't leave. But not in the way where you think she's scared of his power and what will happen to her if she does, but more that for her, it's a hazard of the job worth putting up with for the potential payoff. There's also this running thing with Vaughn suggesting she give up her medication, and there's this idea that Grey gets in her head that she really is artistically better off without them. And the writers really honed in on a very specific but very relatable, weirdly persistent toxic myth within creativity on that one in particular. It's certainly a myth I bought into when I was younger to some extent. I felt like my writing was better when I had some heavy emotions to pull from. And while you certainly can channel your creativity from your worst trauma, experiences and lowest moments, as almost anyone who's ever made great art will probably tell you they did in some way at some point, sadness is not the source of creativity. Personally speaking, now that I've thankfully had a lot more experience where I'm not a mess of poor mental health, I can say I think my best writing and creative output, while it often pulls from bad things, is written while I am not suffering under the weight of them. And I'm able to reflect on those occurrences without being pulled into an unpleasant place by them. Art can be made by those suffering, but art itself is not to suffer. And many people strangely buy into this. I remember this one time, I was in a creative writing class I used to attend for fun years and years back, and one girl there said, in complete earnesty, that her really crippling depression was actually a gift that made her an infinitely better writer. And you know, I think about her quite often, and I hope wherever she is out there, she's doing okay, because I totally understand where she got that belief from, and speaking as someone who used to share it, when you get into that mindset, it becomes hard to let yourself out of that sort of mental prison, because you cling on to these worst feelings in the world for fear that if you let them go, you might lose something. But your art is not your sadness, my dudes, dudettes and NBs. it's your therapy. Bloodthirsty is so good at portraying this toxic obsessive mindset with this really beautifully depicted visual metaphor. You can totally understand why this mindset becomes so seductive for Grey, because you literally see and hear her music get better. The lyrics become more meaningful, the melody more haunting, the performances more natural. You can see why she wouldn't want to give this up. Even early into the development, they tap into the rewarding nature of creative output with a scene in which Grey and Vaughn workshop a song, literally enhancing it in real time in front of you. And it's just little touches, but it's really cool. It tickled the same part of my brain that I have when I see one of these videos come together. Just that feeling of, oh, that little edit there, that totally works. It's intoxicating. But as Bloodthirsty demonstrates, the pursuit of that feeling can come at the expense of everything else if you aren't careful. I think it really shows that one of the screenwriters, Laura Boland, was a musician herself, as she apparently pulled a lot from her personal experience of the pressures and anxieties that she felt when creating her second album. It truly captures that hyperfixation and self-induced pressure of pushing yourself too far in pursuit of something great, and that constant chase of trying to get your ambition to match your execution. Musically as well, and I will admit I do not have the first clue when it comes to music. I can play Metal Gear Solid's main theme on guitar and piano, and that is it. I am by no means technically literate when it comes to this stuff, but the tracks in this thing, at least to my uneducated ears, sound fantastic. You ever notice that thing sometimes in films about a specific art form where narratively we're told someone is exceptionally talented, but then you see their artistic endeavour in the movie and it's like just skirting the line of fine, even though the plot is constantly telling us it's great. It happens strangely often, to be honest. A good example is in a lot of stuff that depicts stand-up comedy. An immediate one that comes to the top of my head would be The Big Sick, the film about Kumail Nanjiani and his wife Emily, who end up in a coma early into their dating life. Now, I think that's a pretty good film. Flawed in places, but a really heartfelt and personal endeavour with some good comedy in it. But for some reason, almost none of that good comedy comes from the scenes where comedians are performing on stage, despite the fact that this film stars multiple comedians I know to be extremely funny playing these roles who are very talented at this format. And every time it takes me out of it. Bloodthirsty, however, I 100% believe that this woman had a knockout debut album and is really pushing to make her follow-up feature something impactful. Because, and again, I will preface this by saying I am uneducated here, and I should also probably add that I have a notoriously bad taste in music, so maybe I'm not the best to compliment this, but I will say, even though the songs in Bloodthirsty are typically not the kind of thing I would ever listen to, they are ethereal. Lauren Beatty, the actress who portrays Grey, really elevates this already excellent movie. Everyone in the film is fantastic, and it's beautifully shot and eerie, and it's got these really awesome practical effect transformation sequences. But even with all that going for it, it would have lost magnitudes if Lauren wasn't present in her role, as she gives not just a great acting performance, but a fantastic singing one too. A singer-songwriter herself, Lauren is the perfect vocal match to the kind of music created through this film. And genuinely, if I had never heard some of the stuff she sings in this movie and just turned on the radio, I would not only not be surprised to hear these tracks on there, but I certainly wouldn't change the station. It's kind of got that sort of dark pop quality that early Billie Eilish had. They just sound amazing. And so when the rest of the cast are all looking at her like, wow, you're coming along so much, wow, this new track is gonna be a hit, you don't have to suspend your disbelief there. Because yeah, it's brilliant. And this helps you as the audience also believe that her character would be convinced this brilliance was worth the cost. Obviously though, that cost only gets heavier and darker, and before Grey even realises it, this pursuit has consumed her, pushed away all the important people in her life and invited in all of the worst so long as they can help her artistically. She embraces all of her most obsessive tendencies. Nothing becomes more important than that second album, and this pursuit, quite literally in this case, turns her into a monster. A monster she turns into, by the way, and I gotta say, I bloody love this touch, a monster she turns into during her final, ultimate, cinematically gorgeous and practical effects-laden transformation sequence to the soundtrack of her own music while trapped in a prison of the studio in which she created the song. That's so good. I mean, that's That's just so good! What a great visual depiction of the monstrous prison of toxic creativity. Oh, just perfect scene. Wrapping the horror of the mind in a physical representation of the horror of the body makes for such a gripping and thematically rich watch. And I think the film is one that is going to resonate with anybody who has ever gotten themselves involved to a hyper-fixated level on a creative endeavour at the expense of their own mental health. And that is yet another episode of Wholesome Halloween 3 in the bag. Before you go, I'm going to be real quick about this one. Here's some announcements. First up, non-trans lifeline charity efforts. I might still be in a competition called Face of Horror, link in the description, and if I still am at this point, that means I'm really far along and would super appreciate votes. You get a free one every day and you can pay for more if you're so inclined, and doing so will help support the B Plus Foundation, which fights childhood cancer. Secondly, I've bragged about it enough, I'm now a creative advisor on a major horror documentary franchise, and it's running a campaign for a new film this month, and I can get you a discount on that. Link in the description below, use it for a 10% discount. Check it out. And in this month's main charity efforts, everything I make from Wholesome Halloween 3 this October is going straight to Trans Lifeline. And you can help too, by either donating using the buttons on this page, or by ordering a charity t-shirt. This is a mock-up design, the illustration is final, but the final print will be a big batch order with a larger scale screen print on high quality vegan shirts that's made at the end of the month. And if you want to get in on that print, get your order in now. They're only available this month, and every penny of profit from them will be donated directly to Trans Lifeline. Other than that, I've been Dan Drambles, you're watching Wholesome Halloween 3 as celebration of horror, and just like every other day this month, I will see you again tomorrow.